and welcome to this segment of Arts Talk. I'm Sherri Burr, your host, and my special guest for this segment is author Loretta Hall. Welcome, Loretta.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to have as my co-host law student Ashley Schneller. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
Today we have the pleasure of talking about Loretta Hall's book on underground buildings. So Loretta, can you just tell us about what this book is about?
Well, it's about a type of architecture that is not well enough understood and not well enough appreciated. And it's a very energy efficient way to build. It has lots of other advantages like preserving open space and even wildlife habitat. But a lot of people are put off by the fact that they're afraid that it would be dark and damp and claustrophobic and unpleasant. And I wanted to let people know that, first of all, it is being built and has been over the past 50 years, and that it can be very comfortable and very pleasant.
Right. And you point out that the growth of underground buildings really took off after the Cold War, when people were seeking shelter for the potential of a nuclear catastrophe.
Right. And in fact, New Mexico was sort of groundbreaker in that regard, because down in Artesia, Abo Elementary School was built in 1962, and it was the first underground school in the country. And they did it, they got a grant from the Department of Energy to help finance the construction of it, and it was completely underground. People enjoyed it. It was completely windowless, and at that time, part of the educational theory was that windowless environments were good because it presented fewer distractions for the students. But one of the things that I've tried to point out in the book is that they don't have to be windowless. And in fact, many underground buildings have more natural light coming in than a lot of above ground buildings do.
I mean, it is amazing just the array of skylights that are available. We normally think of skylights as either the square or the dome shaped or the little round ones that like are tube, but you show that they can be huge in terms of the amount of light that they can let in. And their pyramid shaped skylights are very common and useful. And some very large domes. The Mutual of Omaha Insurance Headquarters in Nebraska has a huge dome-shaped skylight over an atrium and cafeteria area, and it lets light in for all of the offices that surround that area. Wow, that is amazing. Now, in the opening chapter, you talk about the advantages of underground building, including the fact that they are more energy efficient. And you discuss why they are cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And it's not what we would normally think. So can you tell the audience about why that is for underground buildings?
Sure. Most people think it's because the earth insulates the building, but that's really not it. It's that the earth provides a very large, stable thermal mass that surrounds the building. And in the wintertime, when the air is very cold at the surface, 10 feet below the ground, it's at about the normal average temperature for that location year round. So here in New Mexico, it would be about 55 degrees or so. And so in the summer, you don't have to cool the building much at all, other than to make up for body heat and heat generated by electrical machinery that's in the building. And then in the winter time, it's still 55 degrees surrounding this structure down there, and so you don't have to heat it from 30 degrees, you only have to heat it from 55 degrees.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Now, you point out what's critical for these buildings is insulation and ventilation, right? Because ventilation is important because otherwise, the reason why we would feel claustrophobic, we would think, oh, we're not getting enough air.
Right.
But there's a certain technology that allows these buildings to be well ventilated. Can you just tell the audience about that?
Well, it's, you know, they can be ventilated very much like an above ground building. You have to have good ventilation there as well. But I remember a story that an architect friend of mine who I met when I was researching this book, and he had designed some of the very famous underground buildings that were built back in the 70s, and including a couple at the University of Minnesota that they used for research on to judge how effective these buildings were. And he told me about one building where the people inside were just very upset because they didn't think they were getting enough air. And so they went in, and the only change they made was that they put little streamers on the air vents so that people could see the air that was coming in. They didn't increase the airflow, they just made it more visible, and people were much happier.
Right.
So there's a lot of psychological resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because when you can visually see the air coming in, you know that there's air and that you've got sufficient air to breathe.
Yeah.
Ashley, do you have any questions for Loretta Hall?
Yes, you mentioned that from a public relations standpoint, that these buildings might have an image problem with people thinking that they might be claustrophobic in them. What do you think that can be done to overcome that negative image?
Well, hopefully my book. That's really the main reason that I wrote the book, and there are a lot of photographs in the book, and because I wanted to not only tell people but show people what these buildings can look like. And incidentally, when I tell people I've written a book about underground buildings, they usually think in their mind, oh, underground houses. Well, there's only one chapter about houses. What I'm more interested in is buildings that the public are going to be using.
Right.
Museums, libraries, schools, offices, all sorts of things. And so I have chapters about each of those kinds of uses and show mostly successful, sometimes not so successful, buildings that are in use in this country now to do those things.
Well, one example is a building in Pennsylvania, and we have someone in the audience who's from Pennsylvania, where they have built onto the side and yet it's a visitor center. And so from the side into the hill or so is the visitor center, but then you can see the battlefield.
Right.
So can you just sort of talk about that kind of underground building structure?
Well, that's right. And before, at the beginning of the book, I say, you know, what is an underground building? I mean, it seems obvious, and yet when we think about it, a lot of these buildings are built into hillsides rather than being dug straight down into the ground. And so there is quite a variety, and that's one of the reasons that, that they can have a lot of windows and not just skylights.
Okay, that's great. We have about 5 minutes left, so let's ask the audience if they have any questions for Loretta Hall. Yes, Larry? Wait, there's a mic.
How did you get the idea for the writing a book about the underground aspect, versus above ground buildings? How did you get the idea to write about the underground aspect of buildings as opposed to the above ground type of building?
Well, actually, I got the idea right here on the UNM campus. I've been a freelance writer for over 25 years, and a lot of the writing that I've done is for trade journals in the construction and engineering field. And so I did a lot of research at the Centennial Science and Engineering Library here on campus. And it's a two-story building, but it's completely underground. There's a pedestrian plaza with some picnic tables on top of it. And so other than a little glass entry kiosk, you don't realize that there's really a two-story building down there. And I'd been down there lots of times, but this one particular day I was coming up the steps out of there, and it just struck me. This is an underground building.
Yes.
And I thought, how common is this, or how unusual is it? And why would somebody do that? And how would that be different from a design aspect as well as a structural aspect compared to what we, conventional above ground buildings. And so I thought, well, I'll go check out a book and read about it. And there wasn't a book that told me what I wanted to know. And so I did the research.
Are there other questions?
Are all the underground buildings built on the same design? Because I know there are some temples in like northern Italy where they're underground and they're just gorgeous.
So he's asking, are they all built on a same template, or are there a lot of differences?
They're every bit as different as the above ground buildings are. And some are very rustic and sort of take advantage of the fact it's underground and make it look like a cave.
Right.
And others are very modern, and so that you don't even realize when you're in there that you are in fact underground.
And what about the artistic element? Are some of them artistically attractive?
Yes, some of them are very attractive, and you would think that architects would shy away from them because they aren't some grand facade that really draws attention. But well, even Frank Gehry, for those of you who may know, he designs these very lavish buildings with curved facades, and he is now working on an underground addition to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it will be invisible from the outside because it will be tucked underneath the original building and the plaza.
Okay.
But he sees it as another kind of architectural challenge.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. Other questions from Ashley or from the audience for Loretta Hall?
What was the most interesting example that you came across while researching?
Well, there are interesting in many different ways, but I guess the one that really sticks in my mind is a building at the University of Minnesota. The geology there is such that they have various layers of limestone of various hardnesses. And so this building has 3 stories just beneath the surface, and then they drill through a 30-foot thick layer of harder limestone, and the elevator shafts and stairs go through there, and there's 2 more stories below that. And when you're down there, you really do realize you're underground.
Wow. Okay, so I've been given the cue that we have to wrap this up.
Oh.
So I want to thank Loretta for coming to talk to us about her book on underground buildings. And we're going to pause for a few moments, and we're going to come back and have Loretta talk about another one of her books. Thank you. Please join us in a few minutes. Hello, and welcome back. I'm here with author Loretta Hall, who authored this additional book called Out of This World, New Mexico's Contribution to Space Travel. And I want to welcome back Loretta and welcome back my co-host, Ashley Sneller. Okay, Loretta, so let's have you talk about Out of This World, New Mexico's Contribution to Space Travel. Tell us what this book is about.
This is an 80-year history of the tremendous contributions that researchers here in New Mexico made that helped make manned spaceflight possible in the first place, and now leading the way into commercial spaceflight.
Okay.
And we have the longest continuous record of spaceflight research of any state in the country.
Wow. I love it when we find ways that New Mexico is number one.
Yes.
Like we are number one when it comes to artists per capita of any state in the country. We're number one with PhDs, and it's nice to know we're number one when it comes to contributions to space travel. That's wonderful.
Right.
Now, in this book, you go way back. You start with Oñate. You even mentioned Galileo, right?
Yes.
And you end up with the current spaceport that's under construction and is getting ready to do manned flights, tourist flights. So let's have Ashley ask you some questions. She wrote a paper on space travel when she was an undergrad student before she became a law student, so she's really interested in this subject.
Good.
What got you so interested in writing about New Mexico specifically?
Well, several years ago, I heard that the world's first commercial spaceport was going to, purpose-built commercial spaceport, was going to be built here in New Mexico. And I've lived in this state for about 37 years, so I feel kind of like a native New Mexican. And I love it here, but my first thought was, wow, that's cool. But my second thought was, well, why New Mexico? Why not Texas or California or Florida? You know, those are the states we tend to think of in terms of space flight and rocket launches. And so, again, I looked for a book that would tell me what New Mexico had done in the realm of space research, and couldn't find one, and started digging and found that it goes back, well, other than brief references, it goes back basically to 1930, when Robert Goddard got kicked out of Massachusetts for scaring people with his liquid fuel rocket experiments, and moved to Roswell, New Mexico. And space research has been going on here ever since.
Wow, that's amazing.
Sure. And you talked a bit about the spaceport. Can you tell, for those of us who don't know exactly what that is, what it will be and what will happen there?
Well, the Spaceport America, as it's now known, is the first commercial spaceport that really was built to be a commercial spaceport. There are several others around the country that have been licensed as commercial spaceports, but they are all located on current or former military installations, and they don't have nearly the architectural pizzazz that our spaceport has. And ours is built for commercial spaceflight, not only the tourism flights, but also experimental experimental payloads. So far just for suborbital flights, but eventually they plan to be able to go orbital.
Wow. So basically what will happen, I understand people are paying between $200,000 to $250,000 to be on the first set of space flights.
Well,
so what's going to happen? What are they purchasing for that amount of money?
Well, the Virgin Galactic tourist flights will carry 6 passengers at a time, along with a pilot and a co-pilot.
Okay.
The spaceship is attached at the beginning of the flight to a mothership that has 2 fuselages, and a wing that joins them, and the spaceship is attached to the middle of that common wing. Excuse me. And it will take off from the runway at Spaceport America, a horizontal takeoff, and it will slowly spiral up to 50,000 feet. It'll take an hour or so to get that high. And then
and 50,000 feet, how does that compare to like a normal commercial
Normal commercial air flights are usually around 35,000 feet.
Okay, so they're going higher.
So it will be higher.
Okay.
And at that point, the spaceship will be released from the mothership and drop away and then ignite its rocket engine. The mothership actually uses standard jet aircraft engines. But the spaceship has a newly designed hybrid motor, and it will take off and go vertically to a height of 68 miles.
Okay, and how long will they stay up?
Well, the entire flight will last about 2.5 hours, but including the, getting up there, they'll have about 4 minutes of weightlessness at the top of the flight.
Okay.
And then come back down for an unpowered glide landing at Spaceport America.
Wow. So they're paying $250,000 for how many hours?
About 2.5 hours.
2 to 2.5 hours.
Well, there's actually more that goes into it. They will train for 3 days prior to the flight at Spaceport America. Those who have already bought tickets are already enjoying visits to Richard Branson's island, and
really,
getting together at various conferences, and they're becoming almost like a family and getting a lot of personal interaction out of it as well. So there are a lot of aspects to it.
Okay, and will they be wearing the standard kind of astronaut costume?
As far as I know, that hasn't been firmly decided yet, but the objective of Virgin Galactic is to have them be in normal clothes, not a pressure suit, not a helmet.
Okay, so if the rocket part has been released and they're up higher, but they're going to come down and land at Spaceport America, what's gliding that? Where's the energy coming that will allow them to control where they land?
Well, they're landing basically the way the space shuttle landed.
Okay.
It came down from orbit and landed unpowered as well, and just glided to a runway landing.
Okay.
And that's basically what they're doing in this one. The technology for the spacecraft itself is rather unique in that as they're starting to come down, the wings, if you'll show the picture there, the wings on the back of the spaceship start out being horizontal, extending behind the ship. And then on their way down, they raise them up to about a 60-degree angle. And that helps keep the spacecraft pointed in the right direction, and also slows it down so that there's not the heat problem that they had on the shuttle landings.
Oh, I see. So that's actually using technology that's not so new, right? The ability to glide in, I mean, that's pretty much old kind of school thinking.
Except for the fold up of the wings.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, interesting. Let's ask the audience if they have questions for Loretta.
Did you get a chance to interview any scientists in the area?
Well, I spoke with George Whitesides by phone while he was in London. That's the president, I believe, is his title, one of the chief officers of Virgin Galactic. When I was trying to get blurbs for the back of the book, I contacted Buzz Aldrin through his website and asked if he would review the manuscript and consider giving me a blurb for the back cover. And he agreed to do that. And then one day, I think it was shortly before Christmas, one year, a couple of years ago, my husband and one of my daughters and I were standing in the kitchen chatting, and the phone rang. And so I answered the phone, and the man on the other end said, "Hi, this is Buzz Aldrin. Is this a good time to talk?" And I said, "Yeah, I can make time for you." So we had a nice chat for about 10 minutes. It was quite nice.
I would think when Buzz Aldrin calls, it's always a good time to chat. That's
Absolutely.
wonderful. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
and I met several other interesting people as well.
That's great. Other questions from the audience at the moment?
You have to have a medical
Wait, Johnny, can you speak into the mic, please?
medical checkup before you.
They will, Virgin Galactic will require that the participants have a checkup from their own physician.
Oh.
And then as they're preparing for the flights, they will also make sure that the people are in good enough health to do that.
Okay.
But the G-forces are around 4 to 6 Gs, 4 going up and 6 coming down, so they're not as severe as they had been in, say, the Apollo flights.
Oh, wow. Wow. I was just watching an episode of The Amazing Race, and they had a candidate who ended up having an inflamed pancreas.
Oh.
So like the night before, they told him, "You can't do it. You're not strong enough to go around the world. It could possibly kill you." So he had to back out, and they got the other guy a new partner. So is it possible that after having paid all this money, if the people who've signed up, if they come 3 days before and the doctor doesn't clear them, is it possible that they will not get to go then?
My best guess would be that they could be postponed to a different flight.
Okay.
But they have done some testing a couple of years ago after quite a few people had bought tickets on Virgin Galactic, and they put them through some screening tests, and they found that virtually all of them, even a fella up to the age of 90, were fit enough for the flights.
Good. All right. And we have someone who's almost 90 in the audience. So Mildred, you could go, Mildred, you could go on one of these space flights. Can you give the mic to Mildred? So is that something that you've ever thought of, that you would like to, you travel a lot,
Yes.
that you would like to go on a commercial space flight?
Well, if I could get somebody to go with me,
Oh, okay.
I might try.
I would volunteer.
Okay.
We would just need to get someone to pay the
That's
$500,000
right.
cost to go on a space flight. But I think it would be fun. What do you think?
Oh, I think it would be, well, interesting anyway, but I don't know.
And your book, Out of This World, is going to be for sale at the spaceport, right? Or is it for sale
I certainly
for now?
hope so. It's for sale now at the store associated with the company that takes the tours out to the spaceport. The spaceport is not open to the public. You have to go there on a tour. And the spaceport tour company actually used my book as a training guide for their tour guides.
Oh, okay. Good. Good. So, wow. And will it eventually